Okay, I was wondering who the father of my baby was.
All right, let's take a look. The Miss Cleo DNA test. I'm solely searching for the father of your baby. Oh, it's the one that's very unpleasant, okay?
Okay.
And he's also the one that had another girlfriend while he was sleeping with you.
Yes, he did.
Yep, that's him. That's the daddy.
They called it fantasy so that you could forget it was your birthright. From sacred science to silver screen distortion, today we're going to uncover how film, TV, and pop culture hide, twist, and reframe spiritual truth.
Blessings come down. Is it even real?
What's up, you guys? My name is Amoori, and today we're going to be diving into a video essay about something that has been on my mind for a while now. And we're going to be getting into the hidden truths on media and spirituality and the way that it is depicted and portrayed on screen. This has been a concept that I've been wanting to do on this channel for a minute, and I'm very happy that this is going to be the first video essay on this channel. But today we're going to be getting into the distortion of spirituality within the media. Now we're going to be dissecting things like films, animes, different TV shows, and cult classics in general. I do recognize that not everything that's spiritual can be portrayed blatantly. There's light and dark to everything. But unfortunately, I noticed this common, constant trend where when it comes to spirituality, things are often demonized. And I feel like this creates a negative public perception, general consensus on what spirituality truly is. So I wanted to make this video to shed light and to share some perspective, and also see what you guys think. Today we're going to be diving into things like spiritual propaganda, on-screen portrayals of different archetypes of people, and also the origins of certain practices that are often demonized on film. A common theme that I notice in film is that no matter how much information or gems that they might be dropping in these movies, there's always some type of distortion. There's always some type of lie mixed with the truth to keep you confused. I will be pulling some examples from some of my favorite movies and shows, and also giving some perspective on what is the overall impact of the media's portrayals. You guys should know that my channel is here to share perspective on things that I feel passionate about. I'm not really here to argue with anybody. This is just my opinion. However, I'm always open to different perspectives. So I divided this video into sections, so there's going to be timestamps for everything. But without further ado, go ahead and sit back, relax, grab you some tea, grab you something, because this is going to be a little bit of a long one, but I'm really excited. Again, if you're interested in more content like this, go ahead and click that like button, go ahead and subscribe, and feel free to share this with a friend. Section 1. The fortune teller trope and spiritual stereotypes. Let's address the elephant in the room. When we look at how mystics are portrayed in media, certain images always repeat. The crystal ball, the wild, crazy eyes,
I've been waiting for you,
the dramatic
Lisa.
warning, and
you know my
the
name?
magical
Your name
fix.
tag.
The cryptic line that never really helps the hero, it just adds mystery.
After you give the pig to Menki, you must carry Madame Zeroni up the mountain
and sing while I drink so I can
Yeah.
get strong too.
These tropes aren't random. They create a mold, a set of ideals about what a spiritual person looks like, sounds like, and acts like. And more often than not, that mold turns the sacred into a spectacle. The mystic becomes a prop, not a guide, not a teacher, just a moment of spookiness or comic relief before the real story
You forget
continues.
to come back for Madame Zeroni. You and your family will be cursed for always and eternity.
Now, we will get into other ways spirituality is portrayed in media. However, the aspect of stereotype and what has become common cultural norm is of great importance, especially when, depending on how someone looks, their gender, race, or cultural background, the portrayal shifts. The same rituals that are painted as charming or eccentric in one character become threatening, delusional, or evil in another.
I have the cure for your husband's affliction, his compulsion for young ladies.
I'll have you flogged for your insolence.
A love potion to ensure fidelity.
It's like honeysuckle.
It's a subtle form of programming, one that trains us to laugh, fear, or dismiss without asking where these practices actually came from or what they once meant. Of course, storytelling exaggerates. That's Hollywood and that's part of the act. But when the exaggeration becomes the default, that's where it gets a little touchy for me. Because when every seer is either a con artist, a witch, or a lunatic, we lose sight of the real lineage behind these images. We forget that mystics once served communities, and better yet, still do. That diviners, midwives, shamans, and dreamwalkers weren't plot devices. They were pillars, scientists of the unseen, healers of the soul. And when we're only ever shown distorted reflections of these roles, it becomes harder to recognize them, not just in others, but in ourselves. Let me let y'all in on something, and I'm gonna get closer to the camera to say this. Before the mystic was a trope, before magic was a plot twist, there were and have always been sacred, ancient practice. Every single culture, and I mean every, has had its seers, its gifted ones, its diviners, its keepers of mysteries. Some of those people read the stars, some of them worked with plants, some of them listened to dreams, others worked with sound and frequency and the elements. But there was one thing that they shared, and that is the understanding that there's more to life than what we can see. Let's dive into a little bit of etymology here. The word sacred comes from the Latin word sacer, which means holy or set apart. These practices were never meant to be flashy or aesthetic. They were woven into the rhythm of life, used to guide, protect, and heal. Most importantly, as a means to connect to the divine. Systems like astrology, cardology, tarot, root work, and numerology weren't just tools of prediction. They were codes and mirrors. They reflected both the divine and the practical, bringing together the cosmic and the personal. These practices connected civilizations to the land that they call home and also the spiritual world, not only bringing deep meaning and calling for existence, but also aiding as divine and sacred tools for advancement. These are the very tools that they use to leave behind something for infinite generations to come, and oftentimes have been used as protection against known dark opposition. Over time, what was once sacred and revered across religions, sanctions, and bodies of land became distorted, manipulated, and demonized. Words like divination, astrology, tarot, alchemy, magic, these aren't new words. They trace back to ancient civilizations: Egypt, Mesopotamia, India, Nubia, the Olmec, the Mayans, and Aboriginal nations all across the globe. In Egypt, better known as Kemet, Heka was the sacred name for magic, sound, frequency, and incantation. In Mesoamerica, the Olmec and the Maya used sacred mathematics, astronomy, and calendrics to align with the cosmos, predict, and move through life. Through Haiti, better known as IT, voodoo's origin was not a dark art. It's a cultural and spiritual system that honors the ancestors, the elements, and the divine. Even present day, I know y'all have heard the term Hotep, right? Now, that's kind of used as like an insult, like, oh, that's a Hotep, like, get me away from these Hotep. But Hotep, the origin of the word, represents peace. Again, these systems weren't created to just cast spells or manipulate. They were part of an entire framework for understanding reality. They included herbal medicine, energy healing, dream interpretation, cosmology, numerology, ancestral work, and ultimately sacred coding, which we will get more into a little bit later in this video. But where did this go all wrong? Not to get into a history lesson, but let's talk about colonialism and the great divide of sacred nations. Genocide, slavery, war, and religious supremacy systems forcibly silenced and demonized these practices. And what was not erased was rebranded, often by those in quote-unquote power, and what wasn't rebranded was just distorted into fear. By the time these practices started appearing on screen, they were not shown as birthrights. They were shown as bizarre, fringe, or evil. And the irony about all this is some of the most significant scientific and metaphysical discoveries, right? Because they always like to call it a discovery, but it's like, come on now. But I'm talking about things like quantum physics, vibration theory, epigenetics. They all echo these ancient principles. And that shows us that there's really nothing scientifically new under the sun. What I mean by that is the ancestors been there and done that, and they left all the keys for us here now. So with that being said, if you've only ever seen magic portrayed as fantasy or a joke or a street act, how would you ever really know? Now, if you're someone that's like that and you've really only associated magic with Harry Potter, don't feel bad about that. But I do want to give a little bit of insight on what these practices really mean. So starting off with tarot, because I know tarot is a great is like an easy scapegoat when it comes to demonizing something. People swear that using cards equals talking to demons and whatnot. So what I want to say about tarot is that tarot began as a tool of initiation. Each card in the tarot deck represents different archetypes and life stages. It's used as a tool of guidance and navigation. Tarot is linked to numerology and cosmic law. Astrology, which is largely connected to tarot and cardology, maps on divine cycles and their influences on human consciousness. It's an ancient celestial science that is used around the globe, and astrology in its oldest form was embedded in governance, farming, philosophy, and medicine. Divination in general exists in every culture. From throwing bones to reading stars, it is the act of attuning to patterns. Systems like root work and hoodoo, for example, are elemental practices. They are rooted in connection with the ancestors and nature. Root work and elemental practices honored the earth and its cycles long before the word witch was ever written in fear. Sacred geometry speaks to the divine order behind matter. From Kemetic temples to Mayan pyramids and even our own human body, sacred geometry exists in life all around us. It comes back to the patterns of existence. As you can see, there's always a different perspective, and this distortion has great consequence, not just for how the world sees these paths, but how we see ourselves. Because when we forget the origins of magic, we forget that it was actually once medicine. And because of the historically incorrect representations of this, we see it as something other than ourselves. That leads us into the media mirror: fantasy, fear, and the propaganda of the sacred. Film is a very, very, very powerful mirror. Not only is it a mirror, but it's also a lens. A lens that is shaped by those who hold the cameras, write the scripts, and fund the studios. And when it comes to mystics, spiritualists, healers, psychics, prophets, those that practice these sacred arts, the lens has rarely ever been neutral. On one end, we're given Hogwarts, fantasy, floating candles, and time turners. Magic is wondrous, but unrealistic. Something for children or something for your entertainment, but never something real. On the other end, we're given fear, Ouija boards, demonic possessions, and haunted witches. Spiritual power becomes automatically dangerous and evil, something that is to be feared, purged, or oftentimes mocked. Rarely are we ever shown the sacred without sensationalism. So, what happens when ancient practices are always cloaked in parody, evil music cues, or quirky comic relief? And most of all, why is it that anytime there is a black, I'm going to say quote unquote black because you will learn on this channel that black is a misnomer, but anytime that there is a black, African, or Aboriginal person, they are the most demonized. These distortions are not just coincidence, and they're not just entertaining. They are very much political and intentional. They shape perception, and they teach us who to trust. And most importantly, they keep certain wisdom from being taken seriously, even if it's right in front of your face. So it's one thing to write a fantasy, but it's another thing to attempt to rewrite history. There's no coincidence or accident that the psychic is always portrayed as unstable or untrustworthy, that the mystic is always surrounded by fog and fire, and that the woman who lights a candle and speaks to her ancestors like, oh yes, my ancestors, is always depicted as someone that's crazy or just a lunatic. When these images repeat over and over and over again, they become subconscious truth. This is how programming works, through familiarity, repetition, and emotional response. Media doesn't just exist to entertain. It educates, it encodes, and it can either liberate truth or distort it. And from my observation, there are three main ways that spirituality is expressed in on-screen media. There is a thin line, however, that we will dive into, and in this thin line, it's like spiritualism cracks open a waterfall, and it's going to come as a breath of fresh air when we get to that point. But let's talk about the dark side of it first. One of those is fantasy. Magic is dreamy, dazzling. There's secret schools and talking animals, teleportation and chosen ones, but never really something to be taken seriously. It's always beautiful, it's always very fantastical, but often very childlike and unreal. Spirituality becomes something otherworldly, not really to be embodied, not something ancestral, not something real. On the other side, there's fear, and that's where the horror genre comes in, where any mention of the unseen is met with real dread. And I think this is one of the most impactful depictions of spirituality, and just in the way that like a lot of things are very scary to people. Because we have movies like The Conjuring, Ouija, Hereditary, Insidious, and I know there was a new movie that came out called Trope, which touched a lot on zodiac signs and astrology and tarot cards. In these type of depictions, it's like the moment somebody mentions crystals or a candlelit ritual, you already hear the violin screech. In these genres, spirituality, sacred practices, and even sacred rituals are not portals for peace and connection. They are bait for demons and doorways to hell. They are always seen as inherently dangerous, no matter what the context. And what I've noticed too is whenever it comes to them being depicted with a person of darker skin tone, it's always depicted as even more dangerous or even more of a mockery. And that leads us to the mockery genre. Sometimes spirituality isn't feared or fantasized, it's mocked. The crazy psychic woman, the delusional astrologer, the crystal hippie with no grip on reality. This is common in sitcoms and thrillers alike. And almost always, I really do notice this in a lot of quote-unquote black television. These people are always written off as dramatic or comic relief or someone that is clinging to superstition, and then there's the people around them that are not like that, and they're depicted as the ones that are in their right mind. They always depict that person as someone who is just off the chain or just unhinged, or even if it's a very subtle approach. Like recently I just seen the movie One of Them Days with SZA and Kiki Palmer. And we all know that SZA's like a spiritual girl. So in the movie, I noticed that they had a few clips of her, like they added in some dialogue about her being spiritual, and then she's just like, oh girl, I gotta call on my ancestors. But it's like, it was always in a joke, and it was always depicted in a way of like unseriousness, just kind of to make her seem like she's just talking crap. And I've noticed this in a lot of different shows. Like, it's never something serious. And I get it, that is a comedy movie, but like, to me, the issue isn't necessarily the story, it's just the pattern. Because my point here is not to demonize fantasy or comedic or fear-based genres. I too have been entertained, and many of the shows that I mentioned today, I'm literally a fan of. I'm really a high-key sci-fi fanatic, so when I was doing this research for these, regardless of what I think, I still enjoy the art. Especially because of the encoded wisdom and the science seen on screen. So who can really argue that most of these comedic renditions of somebody going to a psychic and then it going left aren't
What
funny?
are you doing? Quiet, Brian. I'm performing a psychic
I laughed
reading.
a lot making this video, but that's the point, because when almost every depiction of a mystic is either impossible, evil, or just a joke, we start to internalize it. Maybe not me and maybe not you, but these things do shift mass public perception and reinforce pre-existing myths, assumptions, and stereotypes. So I do think there's a thin line between media intent and media impact, and I don't believe that every director has bad intent. Some are sharing myths, metaphors, and modern legends. Some are even preserving ancient science through allegory, because again, if I'm being real, I'm aware that not everything is meant to be plainly revealed. And not all spirituality is peaches and cream, y'all. Like, the dark, the twisted, and the evil, and the things that you need to stay away from definitely do exist. But let's shine some light on the benevolent. Like, let's shine some light on the other side of things, because everything is not just so black and white. I do commend the directors and the people that go out of their way to make films about certain topics, because I get it, it's all about storytelling. But it definitely just takes discernment to know and be able to see through the veil on what's real, what's illusion, and what's actually distorted historical truth. So we have to ask, is this just fiction, or is this shaping our collective memory? And who really benefits from the distortion of the sacred? That leads us into the next section, which is fantasy, film, and frequencies. Storytelling as code versus blatant blasphemy. So I wanted to get the concepts of stereotypes out the way first. So let's take a deep breath. We got past that part. But let's dive a little bit deeper into the world of sci-fi. In fact, some of the most impactful films of our time hide deep metaphysical truths in the cloaking of a sci-fi film. Here we're going to break down some cult favorites and exactly how they do so, starting off with Doctor Strange. If you have ever seen Doctor Strange, you can probably see why I automatically had to put this one at the top of the list. Doctor Strange is a beautiful example.
Once in this room, you begged me to let you learn.
It takes complex spiritual concepts such as astral projection, sacred geometry, energy manipulation, alternate timelines, and manifestation, and presents them in a way that masses can digest. The Ancient One literally tells Doctor Strange, "You're a man looking at the world through a keyhole." And this is basically showing him that what you can see and what exists is so vastly different. And even someone like Doctor Strange, who has these abilities, right, is still not even able to see the vastness of this universe. This film bridges science and sorcery, quantum possibility and ancient wisdom, and it teaches that the mind, when trained correctly, can bend time, space, and reality. Here we see depictions of chakras, the energetic body, and the use of symbols for protection and travel, all of which exist in real spiritual lineages, just in this case reframed with a lot of CGI and a lot of cape choreography. Going back a little bit, there's this movie made in 1994 called Stargate, and this movie depicts portals, ancient memory, and cosmic DNA. The only thing about it is, this was one movie that I was so excited to see until I seen the blatant blasphemy and historical mix up. I don't even know what to call it. So let's talk about it. On the surface, Stargate is a film that reveals fascinating truths. Ancient portals, sacred technology, extraterrestrial connection, encoded languages, all of that true, encoded, and real. But what shook me to my core was how the actual movie played out. And when I started to see the known and what should be expected mix up. In the beginning of the movie, I was so excited to watch it. I saw the movie art, I did the research. I was like, yeah, this is going in my video. This is a perfect example. The premise of the whole movie is that a Stargate, which is like a giant portal, allows travel through distant galaxies through a wormhole. But what activates the portal is Kemetic hieroglyphics. So I was like, whoa, okay, this is awesome. The people on the other side of the Stargate weren't just aliens, but they were deities. And once they made it to the other side of the Stargate, they didn't just see aliens, for what I thought, but they ended up interacting with true Kemetic deities. So from here, I'm like, wow, Stargate hints at sacred timelines, sacred technology, and the idea that ancient wisdom wasn't just primitive, it was cosmic. So from this lens, I'm like, oh my gosh, yes, finally a movie that's showing something real, something ancient and cosmic, like really bringing that connection. That is until I watched the entire movie. So from the beginning, I already did notice the little Hollywood like patterns of like repackaging information, depicting people a certain way. But I'm like, okay, I could see past it. I was still able to extract the wisdom. Like for one being that when they went through the portal, the place that they landed on was Planet X, which is Nibiru. Cool, super cool. And even as the portal activated, they showed it formed this like toroid shape, and it was water inside of it, so it was showing like the connection of the ocean and portal technology and the water, and how it was showing a lot, you guys. I was like, okay, for those who have eyes to see, this is like really dropping some gems. But my mind was fully blown and very disturbed, honestly, when I seen them depict the sun god Ra, who is a pillar of Kemetic wisdom. They depicted him basically as some type of alien. They depicted him as a manipulative and sinister alien force who possessed primitive humans to take over his body, to rule, and to cause havoc on the earth. What? Like, where are we getting this from?
Telling you right now, that mother back there is not real.
And in the midst of all that, he was still weak, and like they ended up conquering him. They ended up killing off Heru, fighting off Anubis. Like, it was just so distorted. And what I noticed here too, every time that there was a person that was of darker skin tone, they always either made them subservient first or die off first, even if they were part of the royal, what was depicted as the royal people. I've seen this time and time again in film, where the only time they show a darker complexion person is when they're being subservient or of assistance, or like a side character to the main person. And there was so many distorted, historically inaccurate representations from the people that were connected to the land to the actual deities themselves. And with all of that, the people that were esteemed the most were the pale-skinned military heroes that ended up being the ones to save the day. And I'm just like, what in the colonialism? Like, what is this? This was a movie that really let me down. There was so much potential, and it just flopped. And this goes back to my thoughts about how Hollywood always gives you enough truth to catch your eye, but then buries it in distortion. This is not random. This is systemic. When we see ancient deities turned into villains, symbols turned into horror props, and wisdom repackaged without context, we are being shown how sacred memory is rewritten in plain sight. This right here is classic propaganda and spiritual colonization by media. What is the result of this? Disconnection, confusion, and disempowerment. I was honestly really disappointed to see this also, because what I've noticed is every time there's any movie depicting ancient Kemet, just to be on the topic of Kemet, because I feel like Egypt is something that people massively are aware of, there's always this theme of whitewashing the cast. Like, I don't know how else to put it, but every single movie about ancient Kemet is whitewashed. No matter what the glyphs look like, no matter what, they always do the same thing. We're gonna move on because I wouldn't be able to complete this section about sci-fi without talking about The Matrix. This is a movie that is coming through like a breath of fresh air and truly something I consider cinematic gold. The Matrix is all about simulation, soul contracts, and the war on consciousness. If you have never seen The Matrix, I just want to tell you, I almost want to tell you to stop this video and just go watch the whole Matrix trilogy, but you don't have to do that because I'm going to give you a little bit of a breakdown. The Matrix is more than just a movie. It's a metaphor. It's a decoded map of spiritual awakening buried inside of a sci-fi movie. At its core, The Matrix is a story about breaking free from illusion, from the simulated versions of reality programmed into us by systems of control. That being education, media, religion, government, and even tech. Neo, the main character, begins his journey as Mr. Anderson. Very obedient, tired, and very much disconnected. But deep inside, Neo knows that there's something off, and there's more to this life than what he can see. It is more than just a machine-made simulation. It's a metaphor for mental slavery, social programming, and artificial constructs posing as truths. This is what happens when truth is replaced with comfort, when everything is filtered through systems of control. This echoes teachings from Buddhism, the Vedas, and Hermetic philosophy, that the material world is Maya, illusion, and that our true selves exist beyond it. Let's talk about the red pill and the blue pill, because this is about initiation and choice. The red pill is symbolic of gnosis, spiritual knowing. It doesn't just wake Neo up, it initiates him. This is the first path of remembering who we are outside of the illusion. The red pill isn't about seeing or just political systems. It's a symbol of awakening. The choice is to see reality for what it is, not what you've been told it is. Neo, like many of us, is pulled from illusion into truth. But truth does not come easy. It costs him his comfort, his safety, and even his old identity. This is the essence of spiritual awakening, shedding illusions, facing fear, and stepping into divine responsibility. He's being initiated into a spiritual battle, into higher knowledge, and into his true name, Neo, the Light One. In The Matrix, Neo becomes a stand-in for the awakened soul. He sees the code, he bends time, and even transcends death. This is the ancient path of spiritual mastery, activating the light body, unlocking dormant DNA, and becoming fully conscious. Neo isn't just the one because he's chosen. He becomes the one when he believes and when he knows. And I think this is such a beautiful concept because it ties back to real life. Like, there's a difference from believing something and knowing. And once you stand in the space of knowing, in the space of I am, you become fully integrated into your reality. He learns to bend the rules of reality, to trust his intuition over logic, to feel time, not just move through it. Let's talk about Agent Smith, because if you've seen the movie before, then you have definitely seen Agent Smith before. Agent Smith represents fear, conformity, and control. Basically, the system. Smith represents ego, fear, and repression. He is the enforcer of illusion, the virus that hates the human soul because it's unpredictable, emotional, and free. This is that voice that tries to tell you that you're crazy and to stay in the program. This is the war on consciousness. The agents that you see in the movie, they're not just villains. They're programs, systems of fear, and gatekeepers of this illusion. Fighting the Matrix and fighting Agent Smith and all of the agents isn't just about dodging bullets. It's about remembering, clearing the mind, and returning to source. One of the most iconic figures of this movie is the Oracle. The Oracle does not just predict the future. She guides Neo's remembrance. She represents sacred feminine wisdom, intuition, and prophecy. She is the ancestral voice within that nudges us all towards truth. She does not give Neo answers. She gives him reflections. And when she says, "You've already made the choice, now you have to understand it," she's talking about the concept of soul contracts, the idea that our path is chosen on a deeper level, and the work for us is to actually remember it. The idea that our path was already chosen, aka our cards were already dealt, and it's up to us to learn how to remember it, or how to really play our hand. This reflects teachings from Kemet, the Vedas, and Aboriginal cosmologies that life is a dream that we wrote ourselves into. The last figure that I want to dive into in the Matrix is Morpheus. Morpheus represents the guide, or the shaman, that leads Neo on this journey to his awakened self. While the Oracle stands as a pillar of knowledge and wisdom and insight, Morpheus is the one to walk with him on that path. While The Matrix is science fiction, the questions that it poses are ancient. Who are you really? What is truth? And what are you willing to see? Not all media distorts. In fact, some of the most profound depictions of spiritual principles are found not in religious documentaries or high-budget sci-fi films, but in anime. Anime has always had a curious way of blending entertainment with deep metaphysical truths. Whether consciously or subconsciously, many of these stories echo real ancient wisdom that is often missing from mainstream education. So to fully dive into this section, I decided that we're just going to jump into some of my favorite animes and some of the themes that I've noticed. Take Hunter x Hunter, for example. The main characters master something that is called Nin, a form of energy that mirrors chi, prana, or life force. This is channeled through willpower, focus, and emotional mastery. Or Yu Yu Hakusho, which directly explores the spirit world. In Yu Yu Hakusho, they show the afterlife, demon realms, and even the journey of the soul. This mirrors ancient teachings about reincarnation, ancestral protection, and spiritual warfare. In the show Shaman King, the entire plot revolves around connecting with ancestral spirits and channeling ancient power through ritual. In this show, even though it is marketed around action and battles, the characters access their power from reverence and purpose. This is a clear reference to mediumship and initiation. This is one of my favorite examples because not only just the name Shaman King, but I got to pull a lot of inspiration and I found a lot of familiarity relating with the main character of that show. Especially me being someone that does have connection to the spirit realm and just channeling in general. It was really cool to see a visual of Gon, who is the main character, seeing him and his spirit guides just around him, walking with him, which you really don't get to see things like that. I couldn't do this section without talking about Naruto as well. I think it's a very mainstream show, and at first glance, Naruto is about young ninjas with special powers, but beneath the surface, it's layered with so much symbolism. One of the things that I love about Naruto that I wanted to include in this video is that the characters channel their chakra through hand signals called jutsu. Now, the cool thing about the jutsus that you see in Naruto, they are directly rooted in ancient mudras from Hindu and Buddhist traditions. So if you've ever seen yogis or people meditating doing certain mudras with their hands, these are sacred hand gestures used in meditation and prayer to direct energy and bring connectedness from our mind, our body, and our spirit. Now in Naruto, they use the jutsus to bring more power to their moves, and it really mirrors real life practice because they help them unlock spiritual techniques. Just as in real life, they direct the energy flow and help focus the mind and invoke divine connection. Naruto's journey itself is a path of the spiritual initiate. Overcoming inner demons, mastering elemental energies, and discovering hidden ancestry. Naruto teaches, amongst many stories, to serve the collective rather than the ego. And I did briefly mention chakra that we see in Naruto, but I also wanted to piggyback off of that and talk about Avatar: The Last Airbender. It's no coincidence that so many fans resonate with these stories, even if we don't realize why, but these are coded blueprints for healing, discipline, and energy work hidden in plain sight. These aren't just cartoons, but these are modern myths, retelling the journey of the soul through the lens of stylized battle, friendship, and transformation. Avatar: The Last Airbender is very pivotal in that, and I wanted to piggyback off of the chakra that is talked about in Naruto because it also is talked about in Avatar: The Last Airbender. But the main character Aang is more than just a chosen one. He's a symbol of what it means to harmonize the self, mind, body, spirit, and the elements. And they even have this episode where they teach all about chakra and how the energy flows through our human bodies.
In order to master the avatar state, you must open all the chakras. And tell me everything you know about chakras.
What are chakras?
Oh, I see. I guess we'll start with the basics. The water flows through this creek, much like the energy flows through your body. As you see, there are several pools where the water swirls around before flowing on. These pools are like our chakras.
So chakras are pools of spiraling energy in our bodies?
Exactly. If nothing else were around, this creek would flow pure and clear. However, life is messy, and things tend to fall in the creek. And then what happens?
The creek can't flow?
Yes, but if we open the paths between the pools,
the energy flows.
There are 7 chakras that go up the body. Each pool of energy has a purpose and can be blocked by a specific kind of emotional muck. Be warned, opening the chakras is an intense experience, and once you begin this process, you cannot stop until all 7 are open.
In Avatar, each bending art reflects an internal mastery: water for emotion, earth for stability, fire for willpower, and air for freedom. We see Aang as the last airbender, and he has the greatest feat in the show. We see when he confronts his own inner conflict, his fears, his grief, and even his pacifism, he can truly embody the Avatar state. Again, this is not just fiction. This is metaphysical allegory, and that's why so many of us gravitate towards these shows. These are real-world energy practices, and things like Tai Chi and Qigong operate by these same laws. Now, speaking about laws, this brings me right into the next show, which is one of my all-time favorites, and that is Fullmetal Alchemist. This show teaches about alchemy, karma, and the law of exchange. To obtain, something of equal value must be given, or, in the case of Alphonse and Edward, lost. That is not just alchemy, that is karma, and it's the law of equivalent exchange. I think this is one of the greatest spiritual lessons and wisdom that should be integrated for all of us, and especially in mainstream media now that spirituality has become popular. I feel like there are some divine laws and spiritual concepts that are really important and sometimes become overlooked. So Fullmetal Alchemist is one of my favorite shows because it truly dives into that, and it even also dives into the 7 deadly sins such as lust, greed, gluttony, etc. This series grapples with death, sacrifice, and the search for immortality, and the overall ethics of spiritual power. It teaches that shortcuts to wisdom, to healing, and to wholeness come at a cost, even when it is rooted in pure intent and innocence, which was the case for Edward and Alphonse when they tried to use alchemy to bring their mother back from the dead and ended up getting stuck, losing parts of their body in the process. Now, like I said, this is my favorite show and I could talk about it for a long time, but there is one key deep message here, and it's that not all knowledge is meant to be hacked. Some things must be earned through humility, love, and integrity. And I think with the age of like TikTok and Instagram, just like information being widespread, it definitely creates this thing where people feel like, oh, I can just wake up and do anything. And I'm not somebody that's here for gatekeeping, but I do see how not knowing the actual order and procedure to certain spiritual practices can get people really caught up, and we see that happen all the time. So shout out to Fullmetal Alchemist and anime in general, because what I can say about anime is these are not just cartoons, like they're transmissions, and these animes do an amazing job of teaching about ancient wisdom that has been passed down, but they do it through pixels and paintbrushes. So even when it's stylized for action or humor, there is a frequency of embedding, like a frequency of awakening. While many films exaggerate and some choose to encode, some blatantly choose to distort to the point of disrespect. Then there are some who choose to whisper the truth, not for mass approval, but for those who are ready to see and can integrate the wisdom. Now, when it comes to anime, of course these messages are often wrapped in fantasy because, let's be honest, most audiences aren't ready to hear about spiritual science as fact. And many filmmakers, especially those who know the deeper codes, I'm going to say may because I really don't know, but they may even be obligated to present these truths as fiction just to be allowed on screen. So that is something that I take into consideration as well. And the truth is, some of what we call fantasy might just be memory. That leads me to the last section and the final body of work that I wanted to shed light on, and that is the 2009 film Avatar by James Cameron. Now, if there is one film, one singular film that tenderly brings spiritual wisdom to the mainstream, I would have to choose that to be Avatar. Now, this movie is set on the planet of Pandora, where we follow one of the main characters, Jake Sully, who is coming from a dying Earth as he steps into a new body, a new tribe, and eventually a whole new way of living. James Cameron's Avatar isn't just a blockbuster, but it's literally a cinematic anomaly. This is a high-budget sci-fi epic that somehow centers Aboriginal wisdom, ancestral memory, and deep spiritual ecology. In the world of Avatar, the people, known as the Na'vi, don't just live on Pandora. They're in a relationship with it. They speak to the trees, they connect their physical bodies to the spirit of the land, and they call their divine presence Iwa, a sacred animistic force that echoes real, ancient, lived cosmologies, where nature is alive, intelligent, and holy. Unlike many films where spiritual characters are framed as out of touch, the Na'vi are grounded, they're sovereign, and they're wise. It is the invaders, on the other hand, that are portrayed as disconnected, destructive, and spiritually bankrupt.
Fine. If you love your little forest friends, why not let them just kill my ass? What's the thinking?
Why save you?
Yeah, why save me?
You have a strong heart. No fear. But stupid. Ignorant like a child.
Well, if I'm like a child, then, look, maybe you should teach me.
Sky people cannot learn you do not see.
Then teach me how to see.
No one can teach you to see.
Whoa. Look, come on, can't we talk? Say, where'd you learn to speak English?
Let's not forget, Avatar was still created within the Hollywood machine. However, the story is told through a lens of an outsider who becomes one of them. So while it offers reverence, it also reveals a hidden truth. Sometimes sacred wisdom is allowed on screen, only if it's dressed in enough fantasy to be deemed as safe. And I say that because even though there's so many parallels, we can still see that the avatars are considered an alien race. Still, with all that being said, Avatar does something important. It reminds us that spiritual power does not have to be horror or comedy. It can be beauty, it can be balance, and it can be real. In a media landscape filled with distortion, Avatar proves that film can still tell the truth if it's willing to listen to the land, to the ancestors, and to the sacred itself. Let's go a little bit deeper into the wisdom that is included in Avatar. The Na'vi Way, Aboriginal reverence reimagined. The Na'vi are fictional, but they do carry an echo of the Earth's Aboriginal peoples. They speak to ancestral memory of living in balance with nature, honoring spirit in all forms, and seeing divinity as something not distant, but deeply interwoven into our everyday life. They don't just believe in a goddess, they commune with her. Iwa is both deity and ecosystem, and she represents a sentient network that links all living things. That's not just sci-fi, that's sacred science. Which leads me to the next aspect, which is the biological web of spirit. The Tree of Souls in Avatar is a metaphor for something ancient. The idea that life is connected through unseen threads, a web of consciousness, which you can also kind of relate to the coding of the Matrix. This is like the webbing and the constructs of reality. When the Na'vi connect their braids to Iwa, they're engaging in something deeply symbolic, energetic union, rooted prayer, and bioluminescent meditation. There's a lot of things we can pull from this movie, one of them being even the way that they relate certain things to using plant medicine, talking to the land, and overall just tuning into something other than words. This leads us right into the next topic of colonialism that we see in the movie. It shows us what happens when that sacred balance that we spoke on is threatened through greed, extraction, and imperialism. The story is fictional, but the parallels are painfully real. The mining we see of Pandora's minerals mirrors real-world histories, the exploitation of sacred lands, the erasure of Aboriginal people, and the commodification of nature. This is a story we've seen over and over, but Avatar gives it back to us through a mythic lens, asking us to choose a different path. I feel like this movie resonates so deeply because it became more than a feeling. Even when that movie came out, I remember like having such a strong pull towards it. When it comes to the world of Avatar, this was much more than just a box office hit. It became a feeling and it activated something. It's not just about aliens or adventure. It's a blueprint, a reimagination about what the world could feel like if we remembered to listen. Because I think we can agree at this point that not every film or show that distorts spirituality does so with malice. However, distortion, even when it's unintentional, still does leave a mark. What I do realize is that sometimes the truth can't be shown directly, not because it's a secret, but because it's sacred. Some filmmakers do encode wisdom through fiction to bypass resistance. Because honestly, for example, if The Matrix was marketed as a film about spiritual awakening, how many people would have really watched it? But cloak it in tech and action and rebellion, suddenly millions of people are digesting metaphysical law without even realizing it. So that isn't accidental, and that truly is the power of art and the power of story. And that's why I can't sit here and say that all media is propaganda, because some of it truly is prophecy. And for that, I truly do believe it deserves applause and appreciation. So shout out to any filmmakers out there. Other times though, the distortion is baked in, and it's not just through the plot. It can be done through casting, tone, and context. Media doesn't have to scream, "This is evil," to plant the seed. All it takes is a roll of the eyes, a laugh track, and a creepy underscore that is gonna make you get the chills and make you afraid. So these are all some of the subtle cues that end up telling the audience how to feel and how to judge. The intent may always be entertainment or even art, but the impact can be misinformation, ridicule, or even worse, the fear of something that you were once born to remember. This leads me to the importance of discernment and the duality of all of this that we spoke about. The truth is, some of the very stereotypes that I've critiqued today do very much exist. Spirituality is not all love and light, and there are real scammers, manipulators, and people using spiritual language to take advantage of others. And unfortunately, as spirituality becomes more and more popular, so does spiritual manipulation. Too often, people that are hurting or looking for answers easily become targets. And we will go into that in a different video, but for now, I want to say this, and that is that spirituality is vast, it is ancient, it is powerful, and it is not a monolith. There are many different cultures, expressions, and systems of spiritual practice. There are people who walk with intention to heal, uplift, and awaken, and there are also people that work with motivations and forces that are far from pure. Just like any part of life, there is light and there is shadow, but this is purely just the duality of existence itself. So I approach this path and this conversation from a very neutral place, and ultimately a place of reverence, but also realism, because if we're going to reclaim the sacred, we do have to acknowledge the full spectrum, and most importantly, how to protect our own selves and our minds. The problem really arises when media skips the nuances, it generalizes, and when it erases traditions by lumping them into horror, parody, or just fear-based storytelling. Because when all we see are negative portrayals, we start to fear what could be deeply empowering. We mock what could otherwise heal, and we ignore the elders, the empaths, and the protectors. All because we've been programmed to see them as crazy, evil, or fake. There's a void where truth could be, and instead of reverence, there's resistance. So I'm not here to say that all spirituality is good. I'm here to say that it's real, that it's complex, and it deserves more than lazy tropes and shallow interpretations. And above all, it deserves your discernment. If I can leave you with anything, it is this. Don't believe everything you see, not because it's all lies, but because there's always more to the story. Do not accept or reject something based solely on how it's portrayed on screen. Seek deeper understanding, ask who it's come from, where it's come from, who practiced it, and what it meant before it was repackaged. Because this is not just about movies. It's about ancient memory, and it's about meaning, and ultimately about taking back the narrative and your own mind. This is the paradox of mass awakening. More people are remembering, but the water is also very muddy. So the wisdom is there, but also is the noise. Don't be a pawn in someone else's script. Ask yourself, whose story am I living? Thank you all for being here. My name is Amoori Bay, and this is truly just the beginning. If you felt something today and your spirit felt stirred, or you felt like you had a few thoughts going on, I invite you to stay on this path with me, because this is just the beginning. I know I said that already, but it really is. So go ahead and comment your thoughts down below and share this with a friend or somebody that you feel might need to see it. Let's keep the dialogue going. I want to hear your thoughts, your questions, and your experiences, because they do matter here. And until next time, honor the mystery, protect the sacred, and always, always, always trust your inner knowing.